Most people imagine that poverty clings to a person because of accidents of birth, lack of luck, or unfairness in the world. But the deeper truth is that poverty survives because people follow patterns that guarantee it. They think like everyone else, act like everyone else, and in doing so, they trap themselves inside the 95% who never rise above conformity. Poverty is not just a lack of money, it is the absence of vision, the refusal to choose a definite purpose, and the surrender to the drifting tide of the crowd. To escape it, one must break away from the ordinary, make the decision to define a goal and hold to it with relentless focus until it is achieved. Until that choice is made, the poor will remain poor, not because they must, but because they never decided otherwise. When you look at the world, you see a dividing line. 5% stand out. They are the ones who set their own course. They know exactly what they want and devote themselves to it. The rest wander without a rudder, carried wherever the winds of circumstance push them. Imagine a ship leaving harbor with no chart, no destination, and no captain at the helm. It drifts until it crashes against the rocks. This is the way most people live. They wake without a mission, work without vision, and go to bed without progress. Then they wonder why their lives remain stuck. The difference between success and failure is not brilliance or talent, it is clarity of purpose and the discipline to pursue it. The poor stay poor because they mistake busyness for direction. They fill their days with activity but rarely ask, what is the one thing I am moving toward? Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. The moment a man or woman defines that ideal and begins moving toward it, they are already successful, regardless of current wealth. The tragedy is that 95% never define their ideal. They hope that life will reveal it for them or that luck will provide it. But luck is no strategy, and drifting is no plan. If you do not set the target, you cannot hit it. And if you do not choose your path, you will travel down someone else's. There is a law that never fails. Our rewards in life will always be in direct proportion to our service. The poor resist this law. They think only of wages, never of contribution. They seek to take before they give, to demand before they serve. But the law does not bend. To earn more, one must serve more. Look at every great fortune and you will find behind it a great service, products, ideas, solutions that helped countless people. To serve greatly is to be rewarded greatly. To serve poorly is to be rewarded poorly. If you are dissatisfied with your income, examine your service. Increase the value you give, and the world will have no choice but to increase what it returns. Yet people resist this. They argue with the law, as though refusing to believe in gravity would let them float. Some even resent it. But resentment does not change the law, it only robs the resenter. The truth is unchanging. Wealth flows to service, poverty flows to neglect. It is a choice, whether made consciously or unconsciously, every single day. If you would escape poverty, you must reverse the question from what can I get to what can I give. For every measure of genuine service, life returns a measure of reward, and when service grows tenfold, so does reward. This is not opinion, it is law. Another reason the poor remain poor is that they underestimate the power of environment. A man becomes like the company he keeps. Most people are surrounded by the 95% who conform, who drift, who never get the word. They talk about limits, complain about circumstances, and reinforce failure. To rise, you must rise out of that environment. You must saturate your mind with higher thoughts, greater visions, and the voices of those who have succeeded. If you cannot find such company in person, find them in books, in study, and mentors from the ages. Devote an hour a day to the great thinkers, and in 5 years you will not recognize yourself. Your income, your influence, your confidence will all have multiplied. Security, too, is misunderstood by the poor. They believe security comes from jobs, from bosses, from institutions. Yet all jobs can vanish, all bosses can dismiss, all institutions can fail. True security comes from within, from skill, mastery, and the quiet confidence of one who can perform his work surpassingly well. That is the one form of wealth that cannot be taken, the one fortress that no storm can shake. To pursue security outside oneself is to chase shadows. To build it within is to command life. And once a man knows that his mind, his skill, and his service are his security, he ceases to fear the future. Let us pause to write a law that must be engraved into the heart. Say it aloud with me, write it down on paper, let it enter your subconscious as an unshakable truth. I become what I think about, and my reward is in exact proportion to my service. This is the key to escaping poverty. This is the anchor that will hold you steady. This is the compass that will guide your ship through storms. Fix it in your mind, repeat it daily, and measure your life by it. The escape from poverty, then, is no mystery. It begins with a decision. It grows with service, it flourishes in disciplined thought, and it is secured by professional mastery. Most people will never make this choice because most people never dare to think for themselves. But you are not most people. You are listening now not to drift, but to act. To join the 5%, you must step away from the crowd, claim your goal, and serve with strength. The laws of life do not change, but the moment you align yourself with them, your life begins to change with startling speed. The poor stay poor because they fail to decide, they fail to serve, they fail to think for themselves. But you do not need to fail. From this moment on, choose your purpose, define your service, guard your mind, and build your security within. The path is not easy, but it is simple, and it is open to all who will walk it. Say your law again, write it down once more. I become what I think about, and my reward is in exact proportion to my service. Fix it deep within you, and watch as the world begins to reshape itself around the thoughts you have chosen, the service you have rendered, and the destiny you have claimed. And once you begin to see the world through this lens, you discover that poverty is not an accident, but a pattern repeated across generations. Children grow up hearing their parents speak of limits, watching them accept lives of smallness, and so the pattern continues. They are told, "Don't aim too high, you'll only be disappointed," or "People like us can't have that kind of life." These words sink deep into the subconscious, becoming invisible chains that hold a person back long after childhood. The poor stay poor because they inherit beliefs that serve as ceilings, and unless those beliefs are shattered, they become prisons that last a lifetime. But when even one person in a family dares to think differently, to refuse the inherited script, the cycle can be broken and a new story can be written. You see, the greatest poverty is not in the pocket, but in the imagination. A man who cannot see beyond his current circumstances is already defeated. Poverty feeds on blindness, on the inability to picture a greater future. Yet vision is the one tool given freely to every human being. The wealthy use it daily. They imagine the future they want, then align their service and their actions with that vision. The poor dismiss vision as fantasy, while the successful treat it as the first stage of creation. Every building you see began first in the mind of an architect. Every invention was once a sketch, a thought, an idea. The mind is the workshop of destiny. Those who use it deliberately rise. Those who let it rust remain stuck. The tragedy is that most people never learn the rules of the game of life. They drift, thinking they are powerless, when in fact they hold the power all along. Think of life as a game of chess. Those who learn the rules, who study the moves, who think strategically, soon master the board. Those who never bother remain pawns, moved at will by stronger hands. Poverty is the condition of those who never study the game. Wealth belongs to those who take the time to learn its principles and play with intention. The moment you learn the rules, service, vision, discipline, you begin to see why 95% remain trapped and why the 5% seem almost unstoppable. Environment too plays its silent role. A person surrounded by complainers will absorb complaint. A person surrounded by dreamers will absorb vision. Most live among complainers, so they inherit complaint. They talk about bills, shortages, bosses, and bad luck. But you cannot grow roses in a garden of weeds. If you are surrounded by weeds, you must plant new seeds daily and guard them fiercely. Better yet, find new gardens, new companions, new voices that pull you upward instead of downward. Even 1 hour a day spent with the great minds of history will transform your life more than years spent among the average. Choose your environment, or it will choose for you, and in that choice lies either growth or stagnation. The poor remain poor also because they chase the illusion of security in places it cannot be found. They cling to jobs, to titles, to institutions that can vanish in an instant. Then when they lose these things, they feel stripped bare. But real security has never lived in jobs or titles. It lives in skill, in knowledge, in personal mastery. The man who knows his craft, who can perform it surpassingly well, carries his security inside him. He can lose his position and yet rebuild, because his true wealth cannot be taken. The poor fear the loss of their job. The wealthy trust the permanence of their skill, and so long as you are building mastery within, you are building a fortress no circumstance can tear down. Let us write another law upon our minds and lips, a declaration to reverse the pattern of inherited poverty. Say it aloud and write it down so it takes root. I build my security within, and no force can take it away. This law, repeated daily, will begin to carve itself into your subconscious until you live it as truth. Every challenge will remind you that your security is not in the paycheck, nor the economy, nor the opinion of others. It is in you. You are the well that produces wealth. You are the craftsman who commands reward. And once you know this, fear loses its grip. The poor also stay poor because they mistake fatigue for finality. They stop when they feel tired, assuming they have given all they can. But fatigue is often false. Behind it lies reservoirs of energy untapped. The successful push beyond the first wall of exhaustion and discover strength they never knew they had. The poor stop when they feel weary. The wealthy continue until the work is done. This simple difference separates mediocrity from greatness. Most people live far below their limits because they obey false fatigue. Break through it, and you will learn that your true capacity is 10 times greater than you believed. Finally, the poor remain poor because they never assume responsibility for their destiny. They wait for governments, for bosses, for luck, for saviors. But waiting is surrender. Responsibility is power. The moment you accept that your life is yours alone to design, you reclaim control. You cannot dictate every event, but you can dictate your response, your focus, and your service. The wealthy accept this truth early. They say, "I am responsible," and then they act. The poor refuse it, blaming endlessly, and in doing so, they hand away the key to their own freedom. Responsibility may seem heavy, but it is the only weight that builds strength. So understand this. Poverty survives not because it must, but because people feed it. They feed it with inherited beliefs, with blind eyes, with weak environments, with false securities, with fatigue, and with blame. But each of these chains can be broken. You break them by deciding, by serving, by mastering your craft, by surrounding yourself with vision, and by claiming responsibility. Once you do, poverty becomes a past condition, not a permanent identity. Repeat your law once more so it takes deeper root. I build my security within, and no force can take it away. Hold it, believe it, live it, and watch as the chains fall away, one by one. If poverty is a cycle of thoughts, habits, and environments, then wealth is a cycle of clarity, service, and growth. The poor stay poor because they never interrupt the cycle. They wake with the same complaints, speak the same tired phrases, surround themselves with the same uninspired company, and expect that somehow life will reward them differently. But life is exact and impartial. It returns in proportion to what is sown. And so the first step in breaking this cycle is to disrupt the rhythm of old thinking. If every day you repeat the same words and follow the same patterns, you cannot escape their results. To rise, you must deliberately introduce new patterns, new disciplines, and new truths into your life until the old ones weaken and fall away. One of the most dangerous patterns that keep the poor locked in their condition is conformity. They conform to the crowd even when the crowd is walking toward a cliff. They live by imitation instead of imagination. 95% of people follow the same rules, chase the same comforts, and settle for the same mediocrity, believing safety lies in numbers. But safety does not lie in numbers, it lies in knowledge of the laws of life. The 5% who succeed are often ridiculed, doubted, even called foolish, because they refuse to conform. Yet it is in that refusal that freedom is found. To join them, you must dare to be different, dare to hold a goal in your mind that others may not understand, and dare to persist when they say you cannot. Another great trap of poverty is the obsession with immediate rewards. The poor seek quick gains and avoid long-term service. They chase schemes, shortcuts, and easy money, but in doing so, they rob themselves of the only wealth that lasts, the wealth that comes from compounding service and skill. The rich understand patience. They sow, water, and wait. They endure seasons of discipline before enjoying harvests of abundance. The poor plant one day and uproot the seed the next, demanding instant results. But the law cannot be rushed. Just as nature does not produce fruit overnight, so true wealth cannot be forced. It must be built, cultivated, and allowed to mature in its season. Those who accept this truth rise steadily. Those who reject it stumble endlessly. Ignorance also chains the poor. They underestimate the value of learning and overestimate the value of entertainment. Hours are wasted on distraction, while minutes are given to growth. Yet the mind is the single greatest asset any person possesses. Devote 1 hour a day to study, and in 5 years you can be an authority in your field. Devote that same hour to trivialities, and in 5 years you will remain unchanged. Knowledge is the fuel of progress. The poor neglect it, hoping to coast on luck. The successful pursue it with discipline, knowing it multiplies their service and sharpens their vision. This is why every man or woman serious about breaking poverty must choose daily study as a non-negotiable act of self-liberation. The poor also remain poor because they avoid the discomfort of growth. They choose ease over effort, convenience over challenge. But comfort is a silent killer. Nothing great has ever been built in its shadow. Wealth, strength, and mastery are forged in difficulty, in long nights, in demanding work that stretches the mind and body. Those who grow accustomed to discomfort become unstoppable, for no setback surprises them. Those who avoid discomfort remain fragile, collapsing at the first sign of resistance. Poverty thrives where comfort is worshipped. Wealth thrives where growth is pursued, no matter how hard it feels in the moment. Ask yourself daily, am I seeking comfort or am I seeking growth? For the answer will determine which side of the line you walk on. Another truth is that the poor often waste their energy on envy. They look at those who succeed and resent them instead of learning from them. They poison their minds with comparison, failing to see that envy blinds while study opens eyes. Every successful person leaves behind a trail of lessons, books, words, and examples. The wise observe and apply, while the poor complain and excuse. Envy keeps the poor chained because it focuses their eyes outward in bitterness instead of inward in responsibility. When you trade envy for study, resentment for observation, your life begins to shift. What once irritated you now instructs you. What once felt unfair now feels like a model. And from that model you can build your own fortune. Let us pause here and engrave another law into the mind. Say it aloud and write it down, for repetition carves truth into the subconscious. I refuse to conform. I refuse to envy. I choose to grow. This law, repeated daily, will make you alert to the traps of imitation and bitterness. It will remind you that growth is never found in copying the crowd or resenting the successful, but in daring to stand apart and pursue your own mastery. Fix this declaration in your mind until it becomes instinct. With it, you will find the strength to resist conformity, the humility to learn, and the courage to grow. The poor stay poor because they do not know themselves. They live reactively, shaped by others' opinions, molded by circumstance, never daring to define their own ideals. But life rewards individuality. The strong life is not a copy, but a creation. Define who you want to become, write it down in detail, and begin acting that role every day. You will grow into it just as surely as a seed grows into a tree. Most will never do this, which is why most remain trapped. But the moment you take pen to paper and describe the person you choose to be, you have stepped into the 5%. You have chosen individuality over conformity, vision over drift, destiny over accident. So understand, poverty persists not because of fate, but because of patterns, conformity, impatience, ignorance, comfort, and envy. Break these patterns and you break poverty. The laws are simple, but their impact is extraordinary. Begin by declaring your law once more, engraving it deeper. I refuse to conform. I refuse to envy. I choose to grow. Let it be the shield you carry into every day, and the reminder that you are not bound to remain as you were. The poor remain poor because they do not understand leverage. Not the financial kind, but the leverage of the mind and of service. A man who insists on doing only what is asked of him, who gives only the bare minimum, condemns himself to remain where he is. He exchanges his time for wages, nothing more, and wonders why he never rises. But the one who goes further, who adds value beyond what is required, multiplies his influence and positions himself for opportunities that the average man will never see. Life itself bends to those who provide more than they are paid for. Poverty lingers in the souls of those who refuse to do more than expected. Wealth begins in the hands of those who exceed expectations, not once, but habitually, until it becomes their very identity. Another reason the poor stay poor is that they fail to think independently about money. They treat money as something to be spent rather than something to be multiplied. The moment they earn it, it slips away into fleeting pleasures, temporary comforts, or status symbols meant to impress the equally poor. Wealth, however, grows in the soil of discipline. The rich understand that every coin is a seed, plant it wisely, and it grows into a tree that bears fruit for years. Waste it, and the soil remains barren. Poverty thrives in wastefulness, in the obsession with consumption. Escape begins the day you see money not as a toy but as a tool, one that can build security, expand service, and purchase freedom if used with foresight. Fear also stalks the poor. They fear risk, fear failure, fear the judgment of others, and in this fear they remain paralyzed, preferring the illusion of safety to the reality of growth. But fear is a liar. It whispers that danger is everywhere, when in truth the greatest danger is in doing nothing at all. Every fortune ever made was built on decisions that involved uncertainty. Every great leap forward was taken in the face of doubt. The poor allow fear to dictate their boundaries. The successful face fear, act in spite of it, and soon discover that most fears were only shadows without substance. To rise, you must learn to act while afraid, to walk forward even when the ground is not yet visible. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision that fear will not rule you. Poverty also thrives on excuses. The poor explain endlessly why they cannot rise, blaming governments, bosses, parents, or circumstances. Excuses become their shield, but also their prison. For every excuse defends their present condition and robs them of power to change it. The wealthy, by contrast, accept responsibility. They know they cannot control every circumstance, but they can control their response, their discipline, and their focus. Responsibility is the gateway to freedom, while excuses are the chains of poverty. The moment you say, "I am responsible for my life," you unlock the door that excuses kept shut, and in that moment, your rise begins. Another great reason the poor remain poor is neglect of vision. They do not set goals, and even when they do, they abandon them quickly. They wander through life like travelers without a map, hoping the road will lead somewhere good. But no ship sails without a destination. No builder constructs without a blueprint. Wealth belongs to those who define their aim, write it clearly, and commit themselves to it daily. Poverty belongs to those who drift. If you want proof, look around. The majority live as though tomorrow will arrange itself, but tomorrow obeys today's preparation. Every man or woman who has achieved greatness began with a definite vision, carried with relentless persistence until it became reality. Let us engrave another law, one that will strike directly at these roots of poverty. Say it aloud and write it on paper so it becomes a command to your subconscious. I serve beyond expectation. I use money as a tool, and I act with courage. Repeat it until it is carved into your very identity. With this law fixed in your heart, you will rise above the habits that trap the 95%. You will not limit your service to the minimum. You will not waste your resources, and you will not allow fear to silence your steps. This is how wealth begins, not in sudden windfalls, but in steady habits of service, discipline, and courage. The poor also stay poor because they live only in the present, ignoring the power of compound effort. They do not understand that the smallest daily disciplines repeated over time produce staggering results. They underestimate the effect of reading a single book, saving a single dollar, or practicing a single skill each day. The successful understand compounding. They know that 5 years of daily effort can make them unrecognizable, while 5 years of drifting leaves them unchanged. Poverty ignores the power of time. Wealth harnesses it. If you begin today, you will be amazed at what consistent effort will produce, not in weeks, but in years. Finally, the poor stay poor because they lack faith, not religious faith alone, but faith in themselves, in the laws of life, in the certainty that seeds will grow if planted and watered. They doubt constantly, wavering between belief and fear, never committing fully to a course of action. But faith is the unseen hand that holds the future steady. To act with faith is to plant the seed and trust the harvest. To doubt is to dig up the soil each morning, destroying the very seed you hoped would grow. Faith is not passive, it is active expectation, reinforced by disciplined action. The poor waver, the successful commit, and in that commitment lies the difference between a life of scarcity and a life of abundance. So remember this, poverty is not destiny, it is decision. To break free, you must reverse the patterns, serve more than required, treat money as seed, face fear, reject excuses, set goals, and live with faith. These are not complicated truths, but they are rare, for most will never apply them. But you are not most. Say your law once again. I serve beyond expectation, I use money as a tool, and I act with courage. Hold it close, repeat it daily, and watch how swiftly life begins to shift. For the laws of wealth never fail, and the moment you align with them, poverty begins to lose its grip forever. The poor remain poor because they fail to understand the immense power of clarity. Most drift through their days with vague wishes and undefined hopes, but no clear image of where they are going. Without clarity, their energy scatters. They work hard, yet their work leads nowhere because it is unfocused. The successful, on the other hand, define their goals in detail. They know precisely what they want, and that clarity acts as a magnet, pulling resources, people, and opportunities toward them. Poverty thrives in vagueness, wealth grows in precision. Until a man writes down his definite chief aim, his mind is like a ship without a compass. The moment he defines it, the course is set, and even storms cannot keep him from his destination. Another trap that keeps the poor in chains is their attitude toward time. They treat time as though it were endless, wasting hours daily without thought. They procrastinate, believing tomorrow will offer a better moment to act. But time is the most valuable resource a human being possesses, and it cannot be replaced. The wealthy guard it with discipline, investing it only where it multiplies results. The poor waste it on distractions, gossip, and empty pleasures. They do not see that every wasted hour is a stolen opportunity. Wealth belongs to those who treat time as sacred, who invest it with intention, and who refuse to waste it on pursuits that do not serve their vision. Poverty belongs to those who squander it carelessly, only to discover too late that their days have run out. The poor also remain poor because they lack persistence. They begin a task with enthusiasm but abandon it at the first sign of difficulty. They expect results quickly, and when results delay, they quit. Yet the road to success is always longer than expected, and the harvest always comes after the season of waiting. The successful persist where others surrender. They endure setbacks, losses, and failures, yet they continue. Persistence is not merely stubbornness, it is faith in action. It is the refusal to let temporary obstacles dictate permanent outcomes. Poverty is the result of quitting too soon. Wealth is the reward of those who refuse to stop, no matter how long the journey takes. Another cause of persistent poverty is poor associations. The poor surround themselves with others who reinforce weakness, doubt, and small thinking. They keep company with complainers, mockers, and those who discourage ambition. Environment shapes destiny, and so long as a man keeps the company of those who settle, he too will settle. The wealthy seek out mentors, peers, and companions who challenge them to grow, who inspire them to rise higher. They know that influence is contagious. To escape poverty, one must carefully guard their circle, allowing only those who strengthen vision, not those who poison it with negativity. Poverty whispers in the voice of the wrong crowd. Wealth is born in the company of visionaries. The poor also stay poor because they fail to master discipline. They allow moods, impulses, and fleeting desires to rule them. They eat what they crave, buy what they cannot afford, and indulge in pleasures that rob them of strength and resources. Wealth requires discipline, the ability to command oneself to do what must be done, whether one feels like it or not. The successful are not necessarily more talented, but they are more disciplined. They train their minds and bodies to obey vision, not appetite. Poverty bows to feelings. Wealth bows to principles. Until you master discipline, you will remain at the mercy of whims that lead nowhere. Another great truth is that the poor underestimate the power of imagination. They believe imagination belongs to artists or dreamers, not realizing it is the foundation of progress in every field. Every invention, every fortune, every empire began in the imagination of one who dared to see beyond what is. The poor see only what is in front of them, and so they remain stuck in it. The wealthy see what could be, and they build it. Imagination is the bridge between the present and the future. Poverty is blindness to possibility. Wealth is the ability to envision the unseen and act upon it. To escape poverty, one must reawaken the imagination and give it permission to build bold visions. Let us pause and write a new law, one that will tear down several of these chains. Say it aloud and write it clearly. I master time, I persist through challenges, and I guard my vision with discipline. This declaration, repeated daily, will rewire your subconscious. It will remind you that clarity and discipline are the foundations of wealth, that persistence is the engine of achievement, and that your time is the currency of your destiny. Fix it deep within you until every decision you make aligns with it. With this law in your heart, you cannot drift, you cannot waste, and you cannot quit. The poor remain poor because they fail to understand that success is built one deliberate step at a time. They expect leaps but ignore the small, consistent steps that create transformation. They want change without change, results without discipline, wealth without sacrifice. But life does not reward shortcuts. It rewards steady, faithful, disciplined action. Each day lived with clarity and persistence builds upon the last until the life you once imagined becomes the life you inhabit. Poverty ends the moment you decide to live with precision, to guard your time, to persist beyond resistance, to choose your company wisely, and to master yourself. So say your law again, engrave it deeper. I master time, I persist through challenges, and I guard my vision with discipline. With this truth alive in you, you are already stepping out of the 95%. You are no longer a drifter but a builder, no longer a prisoner but an architect of destiny. Poverty cannot hold one who lives this law. Wealth in all its forms begins to answer when a man or woman decides to live in alignment with it. The poor stay poor because they do not take command of their thoughts. They allow their minds to wander aimlessly, filling with worry, gossip, and trivialities. They think about everything except the one thing that would move them forward. Yet the mind is the most powerful instrument ever created, and it obeys the laws we feed it. If we plant weakness, weakness grows. If we plant strength, strength multiplies. Most people never discipline their thoughts, and so they live lives that mirror that confusion. The successful, however, guard their minds as kings guard their castles. They decide what enters, they choose what stays, and they focus relentlessly on what builds. Poverty is the result of a mind left untrained. Wealth is the harvest of a mind focused on vision and service. Another reason poverty clings is because the poor confuse activity with progress. They are always busy but rarely effective. They run in circles, chasing tasks that produce no results, mistaking motion for direction. A man may work 12 hours a day, yet if he does not work toward a definite purpose, he ends the year no further than when he began. The successful are not merely busy, they are productive. They prioritize the essential over the trivial, the long-term over the immediate. They work with focus, not frenzy. Poverty thrives where people confuse sweat with strategy. Wealth is built where every effort is tied to a clear outcome. The secret is not to work harder than everyone else, but to work more purposefully than everyone else. The poor remain poor also because they undervalue consistency. They act in bursts, full of energy one day, then drifting for weeks. They set goals but fail to show up daily. They treat effort like a sprint when life is a marathon. Success is never built in occasional efforts. It is built in daily discipline, repeated with precision over time. The wealthy know this. They show up every day, rain or shine, motivated or tired. They understand that small steps, consistently repeated, create massive results. The poor give up after the first storm or when enthusiasm fades. Wealth belongs to those who keep walking forward long after the excitement is gone. Consistency is invisible, but its results are undeniable. Poverty also lingers because the poor mismanage energy. They spend it all on distractions, on complaints, on chasing comfort. They burn themselves out on what does not matter, leaving little for what does. Energy is wealth in raw form. It must be directed, guarded, and invested. The successful conserve their energy for the essential. They withdraw from endless arguments, gossip, and negativity. They pour their strength into creation, not consumption. They treat energy like gold, spending it only where it multiplies. Poverty is the result of wasted energy. Wealth is the result of disciplined energy applied to vision and service. Another trap of poverty is short-term thinking. The poor live only for today, seeking immediate gratification. They spend recklessly, eat recklessly, act recklessly, believing the future will somehow solve itself. The wealthy think in decades, not days. They plant seeds today that may not bear fruit for years, knowing the harvest is inevitable. They delay gratification, invest instead of spend, and build for tomorrow, while others waste today. Poverty is short-sightedness, living only for the moment. Wealth is foresight, acting today with the future in mind. The difference between the two is not intelligence, but perspective. To change your destiny, extend your horizon, think years ahead, and live accordingly. The poor also stay poor because they let doubt govern them. They begin projects but abandon them at the first whisper of uncertainty. They ask, "What if I fail?" and so they fail before they begin. The wealthy face the same doubts, but they act anyway. They know that doubt will always exist, but action silences it. Doubt feeds on inaction, courage feeds on movement. Poverty belongs to those who bow to doubt. Wealth belongs to those who walk forward despite it. Every fortune ever built was built by imperfect people who acted with imperfect confidence. The poor wait for certainty that never arrives. The wealthy move with faith, and certainty arrives because they created it. Let us write another law into our minds, to strike at these habits that keep poverty alive. Say it aloud, and write it with conviction. I focus my mind, I move with purpose, and I stand unwavering in consistency. Let these words ingrain themselves into your subconscious. Each repetition will remind you that scattered thoughts must give way to focus, that busyness must give way to productivity, and that wavering must give way to consistency. With this law in your heart, you will not drift. You will not scatter. You will not surrender. You will build daily, patiently, deliberately, until the vision in your mind stands before you in reality. The poor remain poor because they fail to realize the discipline of thought. Purpose, energy, and consistency is not optional. It is the foundation of freedom. No man can drift his way to wealth. No woman can stumble into greatness. Every empire, every fortune, every life of meaning was built brick by brick through focus, persistence, and foresight. Poverty ends the day you take command of your mind, your time, your energy, and your actions. The wealthy are not superhuman. They are simply disciplined humans, and that discipline is available to all who will claim it. So repeat your law once more. Engrave it deeper. I focus my mind, I move with purpose, and I stand unwavering in consistency. Carry it with you into every day. Let it guide your thoughts, your actions, and your vision. for poverty cannot withstand a focused mind, a purposeful spirit, and a consistent hand. The moment you live this truth, wealth in every form begins to gather around you, and poverty begins to fall away like shadows before the light. The poor stay poor because they never learn to master priorities. They confuse what is urgent with what is important, giving their best attention to problems that only distract from progress. They chase after every demand, every distraction, every small fire that arises, and in the process they neglect the few essential things that would transform their lives. The wealthy are ruthless with priorities. They know that only a handful of actions produce extraordinary results, and they dedicate themselves to those with unyielding focus. Poverty thrives where men and women scatter their lives across trivialities. Wealth flourishes where the vital few are given dominance, and the rest is ignored. Until you decide what matters most, you will remain enslaved to what matters least. Another reason poverty persists is that the poor see themselves as victims. They believe the world owes them something, that circumstances control them, that luck has abandoned them. This mindset robs them of the one power that can never be taken, the power of choice. The successful reject the role of victim. They know that while they cannot dictate every event, they can always dictate their response. They choose resilience when others choose despair. They choose responsibility when others choose blame. They choose progress when others choose excuses. Victimhood chains a person to poverty. Responsibility frees them to rise. The moment you stop saying "I can't because" and start saying "I will despite," the tide begins to turn. The poor also remain poor because they fear criticism. They crave the approval of others, even if it costs them their dreams. They shrink their goals to avoid judgment, silence their voices to avoid mockery, and conform to mediocrity so they will not stand out. But wealth is never found in the crowd. It is found by those who dare to walk alone, to be misunderstood, to bear the sting of criticism without surrender. Every innovator, every builder, every leader has been criticized. The weak bend under it. The strong rise above it. Poverty lives in the man who fears being laughed at. Wealth lives in the man who acts despite it, knowing that ridicule today often becomes admiration tomorrow. Another root of poverty is the failure to control emotions. The poor let anger, envy, fear, and doubt rule their decisions. They speak without thought, act without restraint, and sabotage themselves through impulsive behavior. The successful, by contrast, master their emotions. They feel them fully, but they do not let them dictate action. They remain steady where others panic, calm where others lash out, deliberate where others crumble. Emotional discipline is the difference between a gambler and an investor, between a hothead and a leader. Poverty belongs to those who are slaves to their moods. Wealth belongs to those who are masters of themselves. The poor also stay poor because they undervalue character. They believe success can be won through shortcuts, deception, or manipulation. But every shortcut cuts short the very life they hope to build. Wealth that endures is always tied to trust, reputation, and integrity. The successful guard their word as treasure. They know that trust opens doors no amount of cunning can force. Poverty, on the other hand, corrodes itself with lies and dishonor. Even when the poor gain briefly by deceit, it collapses, leaving them worse off than before. To rise, you must build character like a fortress, so strong that no temptation can breach it. Reputation is slow to build, but swift to destroy. Protect it as you would protect your very life. Let us pause here and write another law, one that strikes at the roots of victimhood, fear, and weakness. Say it aloud and write it down with conviction. I choose responsibility, I stand unmoved by criticism, and I rule myself with discipline. Repeat it until it echoes in your subconscious. Let it remind you daily that you are no victim, that criticism is only noise, and that your emotions are servants, not masters. This law will separate you from the 95% who crumble under pressure and bind you to the 5% who lead with strength. Another reason poverty lingers is that the poor confuse pleasure with fulfillment. They chase fleeting highs, entertainment, indulgence, distraction, believing these to be the reward of life. Yet the more they chase, the emptier they feel. The wealthy understand that true fulfillment comes not from constant pleasure, but from purpose. They may enjoy pleasures, but they are never enslaved by them. Their deepest satisfaction comes from building, serving, and mastering themselves. Poverty is the emptiness of endless amusement. Wealth is the fullness of meaningful achievement. Until you trade shallow pleasures for deep fulfillment, you will remain restless and unsatisfied. The poor also remain poor because they do not track their progress. They live without measurement, without accountability, without reflection. They drift without knowing how far they have come or how far they must go. The wealthy, however, measure relentlessly. They track their goals, monitor their habits, and study their results. They treat their lives like enterprises, knowing that what is measured improves. Poverty ignores the numbers. Wealth studies them, learns from them, and grows. If you do not measure, you cannot improve. If you do not know where you stand, you cannot know where you are going. So once again, repeat your law. I choose responsibility, I stand unmoved by criticism, and I rule myself with discipline. Let it take deeper root with every word. For poverty cannot survive in the presence of responsibility, courage, and self-mastery. The moment you live this law, you step out of the 95% and into the 5% who rise. And in that step, you leave behind not only poverty of pocket, but poverty of spirit forever. The poor stay poor because they fail to master focus in a world designed to scatter it. They allow themselves to be pulled in every direction by noise, distractions, and trivial pursuits. Their attention is fragmented, their energy divided, and their progress slowed to nothing. Focus is the currency of achievement. Wherever focus goes, growth follows. The wealthy understand this. They build environments that protect their focus. They say no to what does not serve their vision, and they pour themselves fully into what matters most. Poverty thrives on distraction. Wealth thrives on concentration. Until you reclaim your focus, you will remain a servant to the urgent instead of a master of the important. Another reason poverty persists is that the poor never learn the art of planning. They live reactively, responding to life as it comes, without charting a course for themselves. They go where the day takes them, but never decide where they are taking the day. The wealthy, on the other hand, plan with precision. They set goals, outline steps, and prepare for obstacles before they arrive. A plan is a blueprint for destiny. Without one, a man builds nothing but confusion. Poverty belongs to those who wander without maps. Wealth belongs to those who construct their lives like architects, deliberate and intentional. Every moment spent planning saves hours of wasted effort, yet the poor neglect it, preferring to improvise their way through life, and they pay the price. The poor also stay poor because they undervalue health. They neglect their bodies with poor habits, thinking health is secondary to success. Yet without strength, energy, and vitality, no wealth can be sustained. A man may build fortunes, but if his body collapses, all is lost. The successful treat health as capital, investing in rest, discipline, and nourishment that fuel their service and creativity. Poverty shortens life, drains energy, and clouds the mind. Wealth, when paired with health, becomes enduring. To ignore health is to sabotage prosperity. To master it is to guarantee longevity and the energy to fulfill your vision. Another great trap is the neglect of self-image. The poor see themselves as unworthy, small, and limited. They believe success belongs to others, never realizing that their outer life will always mirror their inner picture. A man cannot rise above the image he holds of himself. The wealthy build self-images of strength, dignity, and capability, and their lives conform to that picture. Poverty is the shadow of a poor self-image. Wealth is the reflection of a strong one. To escape poverty, you must reshape the way you see yourself. Speak of yourself as capable, worthy, and destined for more until your actions rise to meet that identity. The poor remain poor also because they reject accountability. They hide from feedback, avoid responsibility, and shun correction. Yet accountability is the mirror that reveals growth. The wealthy embrace it, welcoming mentors, feedback, and challenges that expose weaknesses and force improvement. Poverty clings to those who resist correction because they repeat the same errors endlessly. Wealth comes to those who humble themselves to learn, who listen, who adapt, and who rise stronger with each critique. Avoiding accountability is avoiding growth. Seeking it is accelerating success. Let us pause here and engrave another law to strike at these roots of distraction, drift, and weakness. Say it aloud and write it until it becomes second nature. I protect my focus, I plan with purpose, and I honor my health and identity. Repeat it daily until it governs your choices. With this law written in your mind, distractions lose their power, drift is replaced by direction, and weakness gives way to strength. It will remind you that success requires not only vision, but the daily defense of focus, health, and self-image. The poor also stay poor because they underestimate the invisible compound power of habits. They think each decision stands alone, when in truth each decision adds to the momentum of destiny. One poor choice repeated daily becomes a chain. One disciplined choice repeated daily becomes a ladder. The wealthy understand that habits form character, and character shapes fate. Poverty is built brick by brick through neglected mornings, wasted hours, and unhealthy routines. Wealth is built the same way, but through habits of learning, service, discipline, and growth. Every day is a vote for poverty or prosperity, and most never realize they are casting their ballots in small, unnoticed moments. The poor also remain poor because they give up ownership of their dreams. They let others decide what is possible, they conform to what society expects, and they shrink their visions to fit into the comfort of others. The wealthy protect their dreams as sacred property. They refuse to let others dilute them. They know that the dream is the seed of every achievement, and once surrendered, nothing remains to be built. Poverty thrives when a person abandons their dream. Wealth arrives when a person defends it with unbreakable resolve. Guard your dream, for it is your blueprint for the life you were meant to live. So repeat your law once more. I protect my focus, I plan with purpose, and I honor my health and identity. Say it until you believe it, write it until it becomes instinct. For poverty cannot survive in a life that is guarded by focus, guided by planning, sustained by health, and lifted by a strong identity. With each repetition, you rise further above the crowd, stepping into the 5% who live by law and not by accident, and who build lives of strength, wealth, and purpose. The poor stay poor because they never learn to master value. They trade hours for pennies, never realizing that wealth flows to those who create impact, not merely to those who spend time. They cling to the idea of wages as though it were security, but wages cap themselves while value has no ceiling. The wealthy dedicate themselves to increasing the value they bring to employers, to customers, to society. They know that the market is fairer than people think. It pays an exact proportion to the service rendered. The poor resent this law and wish it were otherwise. But resentment does not change truth. If you want more, you must become more. Poverty clings to those who give little. Wealth gravitates to those who give much. Another reason poverty remains is the poor's refusal to take risks with responsibility. They want safety without growth, comfort without challenge. They fear responsibility as though it were a burden, not realizing that responsibility is the only gateway to influence. The wealthy seek responsibility. They accept it in their work, their families, their communities. And as they accept responsibility, their influence and rewards expand. The poor hide from it, shrinking back, hoping someone else will carry the weight. But no man rises by hiding. Every advancement in history has been born of someone willing to assume responsibility greater than himself. Poverty shrinks from it. Wealth embraces it. The poor also remain poor because they lack vision beyond their own needs. They think only of survival, of paying bills, of making it through another month. But wealth requires a wider lens. The successful think in terms of serving many, of building systems that outlast them, of creating value for others at scale. When you think only of yourself, your opportunities remain small. When you think of others, your opportunities expand without limit. Poverty is small thinking. Wealth is expansive thinking. The moment you stop asking, how can I get by, and start asking, how can I serve more, you align yourself with the law of abundance. Another trap of poverty is the rejection of delayed gratification. The poor chase thrills now at the cost of tomorrow. They eat their harvest before it ripens, sell their seed before it multiplies, and spend their wages before they are earned. The wealthy delay gratification. They invest before they indulge, they sow before they harvest, and they plan before they celebrate. This simple difference compounds into staggering outcomes. Poverty is the result of consuming before producing. Wealth is the result of producing abundantly and then enjoying the rewards in season. To escape poverty, one must reverse the cycle: sow before you reap, build before you spend, sacrifice before you celebrate. The poor also remain poor because they do not learn the skill of adaptation. They cling to old ways even as the world changes. They resist growth, reject new knowledge, and stay loyal to habits that no longer serve them. But life belongs to the adaptable. Those who learn quickly, adjust swiftly, and embrace change rise with every new era. Those who resist it are left behind, wondering why opportunity passes them by. The wealthy know that change is the only constant, and they treat it not as a threat but as a tool. They adapt, they evolve, they grow stronger through every shift. Poverty is rigidity. Wealth is flexibility. Let us engrave another law, one that will break the chains of stagnation and smallness. Say it aloud and write it until it becomes your compass. I create value, I embrace responsibility, and I adapt with courage. Repeat it daily until it is etched into your subconscious. With this law guiding you, you will stop trading time for scraps, stop fleeing from weight, and stop resisting change. You will become a person who builds, who shoulders, who evolves, and in that transformation lies your freedom. The poor also stay poor because they treat failure as final. They stumble once and give up, never realizing that failure is not the end but the teacher. Every wealthy man has failed more times than the poor have ever tried. Each setback carried a lesson, and those lessons, once applied, became the foundation of success. The poor fear failure so much they never risk enough to succeed. The wealthy fail forward, failing their way into wisdom, strength, and resilience. Poverty is avoiding failure. Wealth is learning from it. If you wish to rise, you must embrace failure as a necessary companion on the road to mastery. The poor remain poor, too, because they lack faith in unseen rewards. They believe only in what they can immediately touch, never understanding that the greatest treasures, opportunity, trust, reputation, are invisible at first. They doubt the law of sowing and reaping, and so they quit too soon. But faith is the bridge between effort and harvest. The successful hold faith through the silent seasons, knowing that growth is happening beneath the surface long before it is seen. Poverty abandons the field in winter, wealth waits for spring. To escape, you must plant, water, and hold faith until the harvest arrives. So say your law once more, engrave it deeply. I create value, I embrace responsibility, and I adapt with courage. Hold it in your heart until every action reflects it. For poverty cannot remain where value multiplies, where responsibility is embraced, and where adaptation is constant. With each repetition, you rise further into the life of abundance, freedom, and strength that has always been waiting for you. The poor stay poor because they never step into leadership. They wait to be told what to do, wait for direction, wait for someone else to show them the way. But those who rise know that leadership is not a title, it is a mindset. It begins with leading oneself, mastering discipline, vision, and responsibility. From there, it extends outward, influencing others by example, not demand. Poverty clings to those who refuse to lead even themselves. Wealth answers to those who accept the burden of leadership, not only for their lives, but for the lives they touch. To lead is to serve with clarity and strength, to become the kind of person others can trust to stand steady when storms arrive. Another reason poverty persists is the refusal to think generationally. The poor live only for their own comfort, their own moment, their own survival. They pass down nothing but debt and limitation. The wealthy live with legacy in mind. They build for children not yet born, for futures they will never see, for generations that will benefit from their vision. Legacy is not about money alone. It is about values, discipline, and principles that endure. Poverty dies slowly across generations when one person chooses to build differently. The moment you decide that your life will not only lift you, but those who come after, you step into a higher calling, one that reshapes destiny itself. The poor also remain poor because they surrender to passivity. They wait for life to happen instead of making life happen. They wait for opportunity to knock instead of building doors. They wait for permission instead of claiming authority. Passivity is slow death. The successful are proactive. They create, initiate, and drive forward even when conditions are not perfect. Poverty waits. Wealth acts. Poverty makes excuses for delay. Wealth finds reasons to begin now. And once momentum begins, opportunity follows. The world rewards initiative, not hesitation. To escape poverty, you must become a creator, not a bystander. Another root of poverty is ingratitude. The poor focus on what they lack, complaining endlessly, blind to the resources and opportunities they already possess. Gratitude, however, multiplies. It opens the eyes to possibilities hidden in plain sight. It sharpens awareness of opportunities, and it attracts more of what is acknowledged. Wealth is built by those who recognize abundance even in small beginnings, who thank life for what they have while working for more. Poverty withers in the presence of gratitude, because complaint loses its power when replaced by appreciation. Gratitude is not weakness, it is strategy. It keeps the mind fertile for growth instead of poisoned by bitterness. The poor remain poor also because they ignore the spiritual law of generosity. They cling tightly to every coin, afraid of losing what little they have. Yet in that clinging, they cut off circulation. The wealthy know that money, like blood, must flow to give life. They give, not recklessly, but strategically, understanding that generosity creates channels of return. They invest in others, in ideas and causes greater than themselves, and life returns to them multiplied. Poverty clings and shrinks. Wealth releases and expands. To escape poverty, one must learn the paradox that giving creates room for receiving. Let us now write a final law, one that crowns all the others we have spoken. Say it aloud, write it in bold letters, let it ingrain itself in your spirit. I lead myself with strength, I live with legacy in mind, and I create abundance through action and gratitude. This is not merely a statement, it is a covenant with yourself. Repeat it until it becomes the rhythm of your life. With this law fixed in your mind, poverty has no foothold. Leadership replaces drift, Legacy replaces smallness, gratitude replaces complaint, and abundance replaces lack. The poor also remain poor because they refuse to believe change is possible for them. They accept their condition as permanent, and in doing so they lock the door from the inside. But change is always possible for any man or woman at any stage of life, the moment they choose it. The wealthy are not chosen by fate, they choose themselves. They decide to believe in the possibility of growth, and by that belief they begin the journey. Poverty ends where belief begins. Wealth starts the moment you choose to see yourself as capable of creating it. So understand this. Poverty is not an unbreakable chain. It is a series of choices, habits, and beliefs. At any time, you can choose differently. You can plant new seeds, form new laws, and build a new destiny. The path has been laid before you. Serve beyond expectation. Master your mind, guard your time, build your discipline, embrace responsibility, adapt with courage, protect your focus, live with vision, lead with strength, and repeat the laws until they are carved into your very being. Poverty cannot survive in the presence of these truths. Now repeat the final law once more, engraving it deeply. I lead myself with strength. I live with legacy in mind, and I create abundance through action and gratitude. Hold it close, live it daily, and let it shape every decision you make. For the laws of wealth never fail, and the moment you align your life with them, poverty begins to vanish, not slowly, but swiftly, like darkness before the rising sun. You were never meant to remain poor. You were meant to rise, to serve, to create, and to leave behind a legacy of strength and abundance that will echo through generations. The poor stay poor because they fail to understand momentum. They start projects, pursue goals, or commit to visions, but they stop too often and too soon. Every time they restart, they must pay the heavy price of beginning again. Their lives become a series of short sprints instead of a steady marathon. Momentum is power. It compounds like interest, growing stronger the longer it runs. The wealthy guard momentum carefully. They protect their habits, routines, and rhythms because they know that breaking them weakens progress. Poverty belongs to those who start and stop. Wealth belongs to those who build steadily, refusing to break the chain of progress once it has begun. Another reason poverty persists is that the poor misinterpret freedom. They believe freedom means doing whatever they feel like in the moment, sleeping late, indulging in distractions, spending recklessly. But true freedom is the ability to design your life, to live by principles instead of impulses, to command yourself instead of being commanded by desire. Discipline is the path to freedom, while indulgence is the path to slavery. The poor confuse license with liberty, and in so doing they remain shackled by their own appetites. The wealthy live by rules they impose upon themselves, and in that discipline they discover real freedom. Poverty surrenders to impulse, wealth bows to principle. The poor also remain poor because they fail to connect their daily actions to their greater purpose. They see each task as meaningless, each day as ordinary, each effort is small, but every day is a brick in the house of destiny, every act a seed in the field of life. The wealthy connect their smallest actions to their highest vision. They understand that even the way they speak, dress, and treat others shapes their path. Poverty sees tasks as chores. Wealth sees them as steps toward greatness. Once you connect your daily actions to your ultimate vision, no task feels wasted, and each day carries the weight of destiny. Another chain of poverty is the failure to manage emotions around money. The poor let fear and greed control their financial decisions. They panic when times are hard, they splurge when times are good, and they swing between extremes of scarcity and excess. The wealthy detach from emotion when it comes to money. They treat it as a servant, not a master. They think in terms of numbers, principles, and long-term outcomes, not moods or impulses. Poverty obeys emotion. Wealth obeys principle. To escape, you must learn to steady yourself, to master your responses, and to make financial decisions from clarity, not fear. The poor also stay poor because they never learn to multiply their efforts. They do only what their own two hands can accomplish, and when their energy runs out, so does their progress. The wealthy multiply through leverage systems, investments, and teams. They find ways to make their effort produce beyond their personal reach. They build machines, whether businesses, investments, or networks, that work for them even while they sleep. Poverty remains trapped in labor alone. Wealth is built by multiplying labor through tools, people, and systems. If you want to rise, you must learn to expand your reach beyond yourself. Let us pause here and inscribe another law, one that cuts directly into these chains of momentum, discipline, and leverage. Say it aloud and write it so that it becomes a command to your subconscious. I guard my momentum, I live by principle, and I multiply my efforts. Repeat it until it becomes your nature. This law will remind you that progress compounds, that freedom comes from discipline, and that wealth grows when your work is multiplied beyond your own hands. With this truth carved into your mind, you will rise where others stall, persist where others quit, and expand where others shrink. The poor also remain poor because they despise patience. They want the reward today, the harvest now, the success instantly. But impatience destroys the very process that produces results. The wealthy endure. They understand that every tree begins as a seed, every building is a sketch, every fortune is an idea patiently nurtured. They do not demand instant results because they know that permanence is born in time. Poverty rushes and loses. Wealth waits and builds. If you would escape, you must commit not only to work but to time, for time is the ally of all great builders. The poor also remain poor because they underestimate the compound effect of character. They cut corners, tell lies, or break trust for small gains, never seeing that each act erodes the foundation of their future. The wealthy know that character is wealth in invisible form. Trust multiplies opportunities, dishonor destroys them. A man with character may fall, but he rises again, for trust restores him. A man without character, even if wealthy for a season, loses all, for no one will follow trust or invest in him again. Poverty is the harvest of dishonor. Wealth is the reward of integrity lived consistently over time. So say your law once more, engrave it deeper. I guard my momentum, I live by principle, and I multiply my efforts. Let it become part of your identity. With momentum on your side, principle as your foundation, and multiplication as your method, you will rise into a life where poverty cannot survive. You will walk with steady progress, real freedom, and expanding influence. And in this way, you not only escape poverty yourself, you light the path for others to follow.